What is genius? One might say brilliance, originality, exceptional creativity, or ideas that have never been revealed to the world. In the case of Charles Dellinger Thomas, genius was exhibited at a very early age. Welcome. I'll be your guide today on a remarkable ride into the genius life of Charles D. Thomas, a local man who revved up the automotive industry with exceptional creativity and design. Charles Thomas was born in 1910 in the small town of Batavia in upstate New York, just east of Buffalo. He grew up in a neighborhood defined by two adjacent streets in the center of town, named after the family of his mother and father, Dellinger and Thomas. From the time he could hold a pencil, Charles was obsessed with the mechanics and design of automobiles. The automotive industry during the early 1900s and 20s was still fairly young and lacked innovation. Most automobiles were designed and engineered by just a handful of designers without much thought for aesthetics or safety. Charles Thomas dreamed of designing cars that were safe, technically advanced, and beautiful, like a work of art. When his father died in 1924, Charles found himself at the head of the family at just 14 years old. In the years that followed, his mother recognized the insatiable obsession Charles had with all things automotive. Through great determination, she found a way to enter him in the most prestigious automotive design school in America, General Motors Institute. Charles was just 17 years old. The school was founded by General Motors in the 1920s and became its best source of creative and successful design, engineering, and managerial talent. The school trained and then picked the most brilliant students to work for GM. Charles fit right in, but at first he was more of a designer than an engineer. Charles continued to show great ability for color and illustration. So much so, the school exhibited his work at all the exhibits. Even his automotive sculptural work was on display. But at the same time, he had fallen in love with engineering. He began to fill a folder with new ideas for components and systems that would improve cars. His unique illustration and design abilities drew more and more attention, and upon graduation, Pontiac Motor Corporation picked Charles for their color and design department. Only a select few GMI students found their way into General Motors employment, and Charles was happy to be picked. This was during the Great Depression, when jobs of any kind were hard to find. However, designing cars, logos, and color combinations, while interesting, wasn't the dream. Charles had turned his attention to becoming an automotive engineer, and he loved the mechanical aspect of automobiles. Engineering innovated ways to move a car. Safer, faster, more efficient was his goal. At Pontiac, Charles started to feel that he was steering in the wrong direction.
Dad worked as a designer in a large room filled with the drawing tables of many designers. One afternoon, the boss was giving a tour for the head of the engineering department. When they passed his table, Charles pulled a drawing out from his dream car folder, a folder filled with ideas for many new innovations in cars. He handed the drawing to the engineer and said, "Here's a drawing for a new radiator that I have been working on. It actually doubles the cooling capacity." He was rudely cut off by his boss, and he ripped the drawing away from the engineer and threw it back on the table, yelling, "Look, Thomas, keep your head on color and design. Don't bother yourself with nuts and bolts. That's not your job here." Sometime later, his boss was walking around the design room and looked at what Charles was working on. Picking up the drawing, the boss remarked crudely, "What the hell is this? A horrid car color combination of blue and green? Only an idiot, an absolute idiot, would put those colors together." Charles quietly got up with a smile and pulled his boss by the sleeve over to the window. He raised the shade and said, "Look, God puts blue and green together everywhere." An interesting side note is Pontiac introduced a blue and green color combination on the Star Chief in 1955. Sadly, Charles was let go by the boss, but it would be a blessing in disguise for the young innovator.
On his long drive back home from Dearborn to Batavia, the young, depressed Charles looked at his idea folder on the seat next to him. This folder was still filled with his dream of the perfect car. It was all there. He began to think, this is not the end of my dream, it's the beginning. As soon as he reached Batavia, he contacted one of his old friends, Norm Richardson. Norm was a brilliant mechanic and automotive bodysmith in Batavia. Charles showed Norm the idea folder and told him that the two of them were going to build a new innovative car, and they were going to call it the rocket car. Charles and Norm worked tirelessly for thousands and thousands of hours in a small garage in Batavia, pounding out the heavy sheet metal body 3 times thicker than today's car bodies, new ideas for how the suspension would be designed, new ways to engineer braking, new thinking on body shape and interior comfort, and an innovative framework.
Thomas' rocket car was shaped like a bullet, a vibrant red, not the darker shade which we see today. The rocket, as the name suggested, it looked streamlined and fast. It had hidden wheels that made the rocket appear as if it was floating along the highway, and the periscope in the ceiling to provide better vision to the rear. The rocket had independent 4-wheel suspension, a monocoque chassis for lighter weight, a ventilation system in the ceiling that featured a padded dashboard for added safety. These were innovations that had never been found on any car before. This car was pure genius. It was so radical that engineers from all over the world came to Western New York to see what Charles and Norm had built. The rocket redefined the automotive history.
The year was 1938. The car was a huge hit. Car shows and dealers across North America clamored to book Charles and his car. He hit the road with the rocket for more than 2 years, showing its innovations to thousands. Charles married Rosemary Bowen in 1941 and moved to Hamburg, New York, into a modest house on Lake Erie. He started a family, and as the family grew, he had to buy a car for travel in his work. At the time, he felt the best engineered car on the market was the 1946 Studebaker Bullet Nose Coupe. The rest of the family continued to use the rocket car.
Dad was an unbelievable father. Here's an example. He was swimming in the lake one day and discovered way out in the deeper water that there was this huge boulder. Huge, probably half the size of the car. And he said, you know, this would make a great diving platform for the kids. Instead of like building a little diving platform out of wood or whatever, he said, I can drag that rock from way out in closer where the kids can dive off it. So he said, I'm gonna gather hundreds of yards of cable and strap it to the back of this car, and it's solid. Listen to that. I mean, it's heavy, it's strong, and he said, I can drag that huge boulder from way out in the lake to a shallower part of the lake so that we could use it as a diving platform. And he put the rocket car on the driveway and then extended the cable from the rocket car up the driveway, through the garage, out the back door of the garage, across the back lawn, down the cliff, across the beach, and then out hundreds of yards into the lake. And he swam out with this cable and attached it to the big boulder, and the other end was attached to this baby. Well, I mean, the neighbors have got to be thinking we're absolutely a nutso family, because Mom was driving and Dad was directing, and he's yelling, "Go, go, go," and she's squealing the tires down the driveway. And it did pull that rock slowly into the shore. Eventually, he got that rock back into shore, into about 4 or 5 feet of water, and we used it for forever. I mean, it's still there, that boulder. But, you know, Dad, what a great father. Love you, man. I mean, things like that just go unnoticed. But, you know, he thought it through. He was a problem solver, and he did it.
As young kids, we loved riding in the Thomas rocket car. One day, Mom was going shopping, and she said, "Come on along." So we all hopped in the car, my brothers and I. And on the way home, the car stalled on the railroad tracks. Mom was in a panic. She didn't know what to do. She tried to start the car, but quickly flooded it. She got so upset, she screamed, "Get out of the car and run to the side of the road." And so we did, and turned around to watch the action. A few minutes later, a guy in a truck came along, and he said to Mom, "Do you know how to pop the clutch?" And she said, "Sure." And so he pushed the car off the tracks. It started, and on we went to home. But when we got home, Mom said to Dad, "Charles, you have got to get rid of that car. I will not have our children in danger." And so, reluctantly, he sold the car.
During World War II, promotion of the rocket car had come to a halt, but Charles kept his talents alive in the transportation industry. He was chosen by Bell Aerospace to work on the Amphibious Car Corporation for a project for the U.S. Army. They tested it on the Niagara River. It was a small, fast recon vehicle that ran on land as well as water. It found its way into combat toward the end of the war. Charles also redesigned the ejection seat for large B bombers. The factory installed injection seats that did not lift the pilots high enough to clear the tail.
In July of 1941, my parents were married. Soon thereafter, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we were at war. In March of 1941, the prototype for the Aqua Cheetah was completed. Dad was assigned to drive it to Washington, Maryland area for the Army Quartermaster Corps testing. The Aqua Cheetah was the world's first amphibious car. It would go 60 miles an hour on land and 10 miles an hour in the water. The Amphibious Car Corporation went into producing a civilian version called the Water Buffalo, hoping to find a civilian market.
While Charles kept busy with various projects after the war, an automotive entrepreneur, Louis Horowitz, dreamed of owning a car company. He was working at a Packard dealership in Buffalo when he had an idea. Horowitz was impressed with the earlier Thomas rocket car and remembered the huge publicity that car had generated. The automotive industry had been blown away with that car, and favorable press was everywhere. Horowitz contacted Charles with the idea of designing, engineering, and producing a small, innovative car for the American public. Soon, an equal partnership was formed with Horowitz, Thomas, and Thomas's old friend, Norm Richardson. The team had immediate chemistry, each with their own skill set. Since building the rocket car, Charles Thomas had a new folder full of innovative automotive ideas. Now, he had the opportunity to bring them to life. He went to work designing a smaller car that would be easy, fuel efficient, fast, and safe. He designed it around the Continental's air-cooled motor. However, he soon redesigned the car to accommodate the Hercules engine, a reliable and better choice. Many of the unique features that Thomas created for the rocket car were designed into the new car. He called it the Playboy. Now keep in mind, this was well before Hugh Hefner created his famous magazine of the same name. The car's logo utilized the iconic symbols of a top hat and cane, often used in film and magazine. The team registered the name of the car and the corporation, the Playboy Motorcar Corporation. They issued 1 million shares of stock to each partner and found a building on Ellicott Street in Buffalo to house the factory. They were in business. Orders for the Playboy began to roll in and they grew rapidly, but the company was underfunded and struggled to meet payroll.
These were tough times at the Playboy Motorcar Corporation. They tried to balance success and meeting expenses. All three partners suffered trying to meet payroll. So on Fridays, Dad, Norm, and Louis decided to all wear red ties in a symbolic gesture to show the employees that they are truly bleeding also.
By the late 1940s, the company had hundreds of orders for the Playboy. However, with funding in short supply, they had to laboriously build each car by hand. It was a slow process. In 1947, they entered the Playboy into the annual New York to Los Angeles race. Every car manufacturer entered their best vehicle and drivers in this grueling race. There were dozens of cars. The little Playboy not only finished first, but broke the land speed record for that event. Because of this feat, the press dumped loads of favorable publicity on the Playboy. Car Magazine wrote feature articles and lauded the Playboy for its engineering innovation.
This is truly a remarkable car. There are so many exclusive features found only on this car. It has been lauded as being a decade ahead of any car on the market at that time. Most noticeable is the great little fold-down hardtop. The big car companies should have done this years before. It's brilliant and works flawlessly. Another outstanding feature is independent four-wheel suspension. Now come on, Detroit. This is a natural for all cars, especially with the rough condition of all roads at this time. It is expensive to build into a car. If Detroit couldn't do it, how did Playboy do it and keep this vehicle still hundreds under what the big three were charging? This car, because of that, was such a joy to drive. The Playboy also had monocoque frame construction. This is also expensive to build, but it is unparalleled in making the car solid and integral. It makes the car quieter, and components that are bolted to the frame, that includes about everything, will work consistently without variation. When you have a hardtop, which weighs over 100 pounds, your frame has to be solid and unrelenting to the forces that moving that heavy top creates. Charles Thomas thought about all these things and the importance of creating dependability. He was a very responsible designer.
By 1948, Playboy was still growing. Willys, maker of the legendary Jeep of World War II, had long wanted to produce its own small vehicle, and they eyed Playboy as the car. They took a page from Thomas's book and theorized, why design and build a whole new car and then end up with a car that isn't as great as the Playboy? They tendered an offer of $2 million to purchase the complete company and the assets.
Dad immediately jumped at the offer. He said, let's take the money. I have another new, even better car right here in my head. The money will go a long way at starting a new company. But Norm and Lou had different feelings. If this car is so good that Willys wants to buy us, so will others. $2 million now could be $20 million in 3 years. Dad was voted down. That may have been the beginning of the end of the Playboy.
By the late 40s, Playboys had great reviews and many dealerships were being assigned all over the U.S. Money wasn't a problem. What was a problem was delivering cars. They needed dies that would quadruple their production. Recently, the Big Three had crushed Tucker Motor Corporation by stopping die manufacturers from supplying dies to Tucker. Now, because Playboy completed with several cars in their production line, they were going to do the same to Playboy. Antitrust laws prohibited companies from doing this in the later 60s, but in the 40s it was easy to gang up on small companies and force them out of business. Without dies, Playboy was done. Before long, failure to deliver vehicles due to a lack of dies would kill the company. They built a total of 98 Playboys and 2 prototypes of a Playboy wagon designed as a Woody. The vultures from General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, and others swooped in and began buying the assets of the company. General Motors bought the patents and designs for many of the Playboy's better features. They even bought the radiator that Charles was trying to give them for free when he worked at Pontiac. Ford bought the patent for the fold-down hardtop. They put it on the 1956 Fairlane, and it was an immediate hit. There were so many superior designs and patents that the big automotive companies took from the Playboy. Even the color combination of blue and green that he proposed at Pontiac, the colors that he was fired over, was used on the 1957 Pontiac Fire Chief. Even the name Playboy still lives on. Hugh Hefner was starting a new magazine in 1953 and wrote to Playboy to have the name reassigned to his magazine. Charles never returned to the auto industry, but that didn't stop his obsession with engineering new ideas of all kinds. Charles Thomas was an idea man his entire life. He passed away in Western New York in 1984, leaving a proud legacy recognized throughout the automotive world. So many innovations promoted by Charles still beat at the heart of great cars from the 50s, 60s, and even today. Thanks to the Thomas rocket, the Playboy, and the imagination, the genius of Charles D. Thomas.